Hi, my name is Ruby Quiroz, and my topic is the impact of financial stress on burnout and mental health in first generation Latino students. These are some of the terms I used throughout my research. Financial stress. Financial stress is that ongoing worry about how to afford school, bills, food, and basically surviving while being in college. Academic burnout. Academic burnout is that feeling of emotional exhaustion and just mentally checking out from school. Mental health. Mental health can include anxiety, depression, and overall stress that affects a student's well being. Just to go a little deeper in how these terms are viewed in this kind of research, we explain the terms as financial stress not always being obvious. It can mean skipping meals, working too many hours while still falling behind, or even feeling guilty for being a financial burden to family, friends, and more. It's a kind of stress that follows you outside the classroom. Academic burnout doesn't just mean being tired. It's that numbness that builds up when you've been pushing yourself too hard for too long. You stop feeling motivated even if you care. And lastly, mental health struggles don't always show up as a breakdown. They might look like always being on edge, not being able to sleep, or isolating from others just to cope. These are some of the layers I'm trying to capture in this research project. My research question is, what are the mechanisms through which financial stress lead to academic burnout and worsen mental health among first-generation Latino college students? My hypothesis is that higher levels of financial stress are associated with increased emotional exhaustion and reduced access to coping resources, which contribute to academic burnout and mental health struggles. Part of why I chose this topic is because it's personal. I've felt this kind of stress myself, and I know so many other first generation students who are also just trying to survive college. But also beyond that, this topic matters sociologically. It exposes how systems like capitalism and structural inequality affect real people in real ways. This type of research is so important for higher education institutions because financial stress isn't just a personal issue, it's a structural one. When schools don't account for the different financial backgrounds students come from, they're contributing to a system that unintentionally harms the most vulnerable. By doing this kind of research, we can push universities to create policies that help all students differently. For first generation Latino students, this can mean the difference between staying in school or dropping out, the difference between burnout or getting support. That's why this topic goes beyond my personal experience. It's a broader, systemic issue that needs attention. When schools treat students like they are all starting from the same place, they ignore things like financial pressure, unpaid emotional labor, and cultural expectations that many first generation students, especially Latino students, carry with them. This research is about highlighting a larger pattern that's often overlooked in higher education and showing how financial stress is a part of that. These are just 4 key articles that support my research. Starting with Britt and others, they found that students experiencing high financial stress were more likely to have lower GPAs and were also at a higher risk of dropping out. What stood out in their study was how financial pressure didn't just affect academic performance. It also affected students' confidence and long-term educational goals. So this wasn't just a short-term issue. It had real consequences for college persistence. Stevens and others focused on what cultural mismatch between first-generation students and the culture of higher education is. They found that universities tend to promote individual achievement and independence, but many first-generation students come from more interdependent cultural backgrounds, where family obligations matter just as much. When you add financial stress to that mismatch, like feeling pressure to send money home or not being able to participate in campus life, the stress multiplies, especially for first-generation students who feel pulled between school and financial responsibility. Adams and others look specifically at how financial strain increased symptoms of anxiety and depression. Their work showed that when students are financially stressed, they're more likely to withdraw socially and academically, making it harder to stay motivated or engaged in class, even if they care about their education. And finally, Morenz explored how coping mechanisms can play a big role in moderating stress. Some students who had better access to mental health services or who had strong social support were less impacted by financial stress. But not all students have access to those resources. That gap in access is what makes this an equity issue, not just a personal problem. For methods, I'm planning on doing a quantitative survey, and I increased the sample size to approximately 300 first-generation Latino undergraduate students across the UC and CSU campuses. This is in hopes to improve the reliability of the findings and allow for more subgroup analysis. I plan to recruit participants through student organizations and social media. For my variables, I have my independent variable as financial stress, measured using the financial stress scale, where they ask questions such as, how often do you feel stressed about your finances? With the responses scaling from 1, which is never, to 5, which is almost always. For dependent variables, I have academic burnout, measured with the Maslach burnout inventory. It includes statements like, I feel emotionally drained by my studies. And students rate how often they feel that way from 0 for never to 6 for every single day. And then mental health, measured with the depression, anxiety, stress scale, where there are statements like, I felt that I had nothing to look forward to, where they rate it from 0 to 3 for the week, ranging from did not apply to me at all to apply to me most or all of the time. I chose these particular survey tools because they've been used and tested in real academic studies, and they reflect what college students actually go through. The financial stress scale directly asks about things students are constantly thinking about, such as rent, food, and tuition. The Maslach burnout inventory is widely used in education to measure emotional exhaustion and disengagement from school. And lastly, the depression and anxiety stress scale is great for measuring how stress, depression, and anxiety show up in students' lives. So I wanted to use tools that have been used pretty often and are very reliable to this kind of research. I will also be controlling for variables such as GPA, which matters because students who are doing well academically might still feel overwhelmed, but in different ways than students who are struggling. Gender, because women and gender diverse students often face higher emotional labor and more financial vulnerability. School year, because a freshman might be adjusting to college for the first time, while seniors are facing graduation pressure, job uncertainty, and higher debt. And also prior education, as this may lead to some students having different financial experiences. I expect to find that financial stress leads to emotional exhaustion and worsens mental health. This matters because it shows how stress plays out, not just that it exists, but how it impacts students in real ways. There are, of course, some limitations, like having to rely on self-reported data, the fact that it's cross-sectional, so I can't study changes over time, and lastly, my sample may not reflect every first-generation Latino student. So what does this all mean for universities? How can they actually take this information and use it to help students like us? Well, the way this research could help colleges and universities is by helping develop better support systems for students. For example, it could be used to improve mental health services, guide financial aid policies, or build first-generation student support programs that recognize these invisible pressures. Schools could even use this kind of data to identify students at risk of burnout earlier and intervene before they're completely overwhelmed. In conclusion, financial stress doesn't just hurt grades. It shapes how students live, feel, and even function. Academic burnout and mental health struggles aren't about laziness. They're tied to financial survival. Schools need to improve their resources and offer better support systems for hidden and invisible stress. And although I am focusing on first-generation Latino students, I think this research speaks to a broader need for universities to support students dealing with invisible pressures. Thank you.